confirm to me that the meeting is being recorded? Thank you. So, good afternoon and welcome to the Education and Children's Services Policy Board. It's been some time since we've last met. Glad to see that so many of you have managed to fight the technology to be with us today. This is the first meeting of the Policy Board that's been held remotely and I can confirm that it has been recorded. This is an important step for the Policy Board. As you know, we're not able to hold meetings in public at our usual location due to the guidance on public health measures to tackle the COVID-19 emergency. Therefore, it's important that we take steps that are available to us to make proceedings of this Policy Board open to scrutiny, not only by the public but also by all other elected members. And I can advise that the recording of the meeting will be available to watch on Renfrewshire Council's website following the meeting, or following the conclusion of the meeting. Although most members of the board are familiar with the basic rules to be followed for a meeting held remotely, to ensure that the meeting proceeds efficiently, there are a couple of additional points that I'd like to bring to your attention. These are, it is even more important than usual to ensure your microphone is on when speaking. This is because obviously so you're picked up on the recording, but also the noise from another microphone is picked up, the pitch will change to them, so only have your microphone on if you're speaking. And for the same reason, it's important that you give yourself a slight pause once you click unmute. Maybe wait 2 seconds before you start speaking, because there seems to be a slight delay. And if you start speaking too quickly, the beginning of your contribution might get missed. So just give it a couple of seconds after you click unmute. And the content of the show conversation box, which is the chat box, is part of the recording. So anything you type in there will appear as part of the recording. So I just want members to be aware of that. Anybody who's using their phone to access should also put their phones on mute for when not addressing the meeting. Before we move on, I'm going to ask the clerk to do a roll call of members, so it's clear who everybody who's present for the purposes of the recording. But before I do that, I'd like to welcome Mary Jane Bird, who's their new Church of Scotland rep on the board, and this is our first meeting today. And I'd like to say welcome, Mary Jane. Oh. Okay, can I ask the clerk to do the roll call now?
Yeah, we've got present Councillor Bibby, Miss Bird, Provost Cameron, Councillors Davidson, Dawn, Grady, Graham, Hughes, Kennedy, Kerr, McNaughton, Milet, Mr Milani, Councillors Nicholson, Patterson, Rodden, Shaw and Strang. And we've got no apologies.
Many thanks for that, Tracy. Right, before we move on to the agenda as it is in front of you, if you would just bear with me slightly. I'd like to just say, given the events of this week and that we have had a number of confirmed COVID-19 cases within Renfrewshire schools, I appreciate that members of the board will have questions on this, and I would propose that we take this as part of agenda item 2, if that's agreeable to all the members. Okay. I take silence as agreement, I will warn you. So, thank you. Tracy's indicated already we have no apologies. Declarations of interest. Councillor Bibby, you've indicated a declaration of interest.
Yes, thanks, convener. Item 9, I have a non-financial interest in the dim and distant past. I was the external manager for both Roneil and Longcroft. However, I will remain online for the discussion of that item. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Davidson, you want to declare an interest?
You're on mute, Councillor Davidson.
Councillor Davidson, I'm afraid you're still on mute. We haven't picked that up. On you can start again now, actually.
Hold on.
You're okay to speak, Councillor Davidson. We can hear you now.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Right. Sorry, it's showing us my mic is muted. No, it's just an unpecuniary interest in item 9 as well. I've got a family member who works for the service, so that's all. I'll retain the right to part in the debate. Thank you. Did you get me?
Yeah, we've got that, Councillor Davidson, thank you. Is there any other declarations of interest? No, okay. Can I propose then we move on to agenda item 1, which is the budget monitoring report. First up to speak on this, Councillor Bibby's indicated he'd like to make ask a question or make an inquiry.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Can I refer members to page 13 and item 3.1, rather, annual overspend on children and families. Page 13 indicates the roll out the expenditure. Can I ask what percentage of the overspend was in the use of residential schools? And was that overspend due to an increase in the number of places used by the council or increased charges? Thanks.
Could I ask the relevant officer to come in and answer Councillor Bibby's inquiry on that one?
Councillor Bibby, it's George McLaughlin. I'm sorry to say I don't have the answers to those questions. I will get them for you after the meeting and send them to you directly.
Many thanks, George. Can I ask that the answer circulated by all board members who might now have an interest in the question because Councillor Bibby's asked it?
Of course.
Okay, thanks. Is there any other questions or inquiries on this item? Nope. Okay, can we agree the item, please? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to item 2, but just before we start, I just wanted to take this opportunity to put on record my thanks to all the teaching and support staff who, for the last several months, have shown great professionalism and dedication, and that also is extended to the social work staff who have continued to support and engage with some of our most vulnerable residents throughout this pandemic. I would also ask members to show appreciation to Stephen and the team at Council HQ, who have done a tremendous job in dealing with the initial closures of schools, developing a blended learning model that was eventually not required, and ensuring that schools were able to open earlier this month. Now, I know that members will have questions regarding the positive COVID-19 cases, which we have had confirmed this week. It is regrettable that we have confirmed cases, but I hope members take comfort in the efficient and professional manner which the Council and Public Health Scotland have dealt with these cases, and that there is a confidence in their track and trace procedures. Before opening this item up to members, I would caution that whilst I'm happy for the discussion to take place, I'd like it to be based in facts. I don't want any social media rumour or conjecture finding its way into this meeting. We do have a duty as elected members to question and scrutinise, but I want this done in a factual and non-sensational manner, given the seriousness of the subject. So that's all I have to say at this time. Councillor Grady's indicated he'd like to come in.
Thank you, Chair. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank all the school staff, teachers, support workers, key workers, janitorial staff, council officers, and their hard work in meeting the needs of our young people at this very difficult time, despite the continued shift in guidance they've had to respond to so flexibly. Also on this item, I'd like to say that I'm a bit disappointed that the SQA exams fiasco isn't on the agenda. However, I look forward to it being on the agenda for the next meeting. I'm going to touch on the COVID-19, as I'm sure you would expect. I've got three questions, and I'll give you in a order. I'd just like to ask, since staff and pupils have returned since last week, how many COVID-19 tests have been requested? How many have returned positive? And what was the nature of the transmission? Thank you.
Thanks for your question, Councillor Grady. I'll bring in the relevant officer in a moment. To the point you made about the exam, and your words fiasco, not the words that I would necessarily use, although it was a very difficult time for many of the pupils and parents involved. As has always been the case, we bring a paper about the exam results to the October board, which gives the officers time to break into the data and see what it means for Renfrewshire. As you'll probably appreciate, that's been even more difficult than it has been in previous years because of the shift in policy between the results being made public and then the change in direction which many young people campaigned for. I'm pleased that we did see that change in direction, and I'm also pleased that we've seen that change in direction across all 4 governments in the United Kingdom. It's the right thing to do. It's been a unique year. It's been a year like no other, and no child should have had to suffer at all at the hands of essentially something well out of their control, given the hard work that they've put in. On the 3 questions you asked, I'm going to pass over to Stephen Quinn, but I believe we've also maybe got Chris Dalrymple we've asked to join us today, who might be able to give you a bit more information given his role within the council. But initially I'll pass to Stephen, and if he wants to pass to Chris, that would be fine.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson, and thank you, Councillor Grady, both for your comments in terms of the work right across the Directorate and, of course, across the other directorates in the Council who have worked tirelessly to get our children, our young people back into nurseries and schools. So thank you for that. In terms of your questions, Councillor Grady, and I'll bring in Chris in a moment, who may be able to offer any further detail. I can't answer the first one about how many have been requested, because that is up to the individual. So we know about a number who can be requested, but of course there are children across our schools whose parents can go and get them tested and have had them tested, and we can't say for definite whether that has happened or not. Any child who gets sent home with symptoms, we ask for them to be tested, and therefore we ask the parents to go and have them tested, and therefore we can keep a track of that, but I can't keep a track of every single child. In terms of how many positive, as of this morning, we had 3 positive cases, as have been reported by Public Health across 3 different schools. And whilst I cannot comment, it's for Public Health to do so about where they believe that they may have come from, I can say that the information they have given us as far as to the best of their understanding, they have not come from a source within either of the 3 schools. But I'll bring Chris in. He may be able to offer anything further for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Convener, and thank you, Councillor Grady. I really don't have too much more to offer than Stephen. I have sat on the 3 problem assessment groups over the last 3 days to offer guidance and advice from an environmental health perspective. And there was really just 2 things I wanted to add. One, exactly as Stephen said, the Public Health Protection Unit have said they don't believe it was either transmitted or acquired within the school premises. And secondly, that the Public Health Protection Unit are very supportive of the control measures that have been put in place across all school establishments so far, and they feel that has kept the numbers as low as possible with regards to potential transmission on. So far it has went well, and we'll continue to work with Stephen and the team as things move forward.
Thank you, Stephen, and thank you, Chris. Councillor Bibby, you've indicated you'd like to come in on this item.
Yes, thanks, Convener. Just to endorse the comments made by yourself and Councillor Grady regarding the magnificent contribution that all the workers referenced in this report have made in the last 5 months. My questions refer to paragraph point 4.5, which is to do with child protection. At the beginning of lockdown, there were predictions made that child protection's referrals might actually increase because of the situation that families would find themselves in. Is there any evidence that actually child protection referrals have increased? And also, given that the social work offices have been closed, what impact has the support available to high-risk new referrals had? And the other point is 5.1, which is to do with adaptations to and new builds of nurseries to provide the enhanced or additional childcare hours. Obviously, construction work was on hold in March. In some areas, I know it's now recommenced. but what are the new timescales? Obviously, recognising that COVID-19 will influence obviously the availability of that provision as well. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Bibby. Can I ask John Traynor to come in and address the first part of your first question, rather, and then if Julie Calder could come in and answer your second question, that'd be great.
Thanks, Councillor Patterson. Councillor Bibby, you'll recall or perhaps seen some comments that I made at emergency boards early in the pandemic around a number of referrals for child protection actually reducing. However, after probably the first 4 weeks, we returned to what we would have considered to be the pre-COVID referral rate, and it has retained a fairly consistent pattern as it has in previous years. So we are confident that we are picking up referrals, both preventative referrals and reactive referrals. So those are some referrals where in a preventative sense, an agency has had contact with a service, a family, and has raised a proactive concern about the family requiring support. That could be a health worker, it could be one of our own staff, and I'll talk a wee bit more about what they did in terms of providing support in a moment, or it could be the family have themselves contacted services, so we did respond to that. In terms of the reactive, there have been some instances where families have been referred to the police for either a concern about a child or a concern about a parent in relation to a child, and we've been able to manage those appropriately. Again, during the initial period of pandemic, we had closed all of our offices. However, after around again about 4 weeks, we opened St James's Street for a base for social work to ensure that we had a location within the area that we could operate from. But social work staff continued to operate fully throughout the pandemic period from their homes. So they carried out for children who were on the Child Protection Register, for children who were subject to compulsory supervision, or for other children that we'd identified a concern, we actually visited them on a regular basis. Now, those visits were managed in terms of hygiene and social distancing, but those visits did take place. So within the confines of the pandemic, social work provided a normal service to families who required it. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, yep, fine.
Thanks, John. Before I bring Julie in, can I ask Councillor Dunn, as indicated, he's got a question which I think might dovetail with yourselves, Councillor Bibby, so I'll bring Councillor Dunn in now and Julie can address both points at the same time.
Thanks, Convener. Yeah, it was just obviously the new nursery in Dargaville is quite a kind of sought after, and it's just to see if there has been any update. I know it refers to delays to construction works. It's just to see if there's any update or timeline as to when that will be ready. Thanks.
Julie, you want to come in and talk obviously generally about Councillor Bibby's point, but also the specific question about the Dargaville new build. Thank you. Is Julie on the call? Sorry, I'm just assuming she's here.
No, sorry, thank you, Convener. I was on mute there, so apologies for that. And thank you for your questions. We are working very hard to roll out 1140 where possible. You'll know that the government has paused the 1140 as a statutory requirement, and we're waiting for further detail on that. Our resource team have been working incredibly hard to get our infrastructure back on track following delays to building as a result of COVID. What I can say, and I'm delighted to say, is that prior to lockdown, we had approximately 42% who were receiving 1140, and that is now increased to approximately 78% based on allocations. Now, specifically with regards to the building works, I intend to bring a report, our paper to board at the next board, which will give specific details on that, because the resource team are working with building services and with contractors just to finalise exactly what that is going to look like moving forward. So in terms of specific dates, unfortunately, I'm not able to provide that at this time. However, I can say that we're working hard with our partners to get that confirmed as quickly as possible. So I will be bringing further detail to that at the next board.
Thanks, Julie. What I will say is, obviously, given the interest in this, not only for the specific ward members where these nurseries are, but the 1140 in general, when we do have more detail, we will make contact with the ward members to update them if the detail available before the next board, rather than wait to that point. If there's no detail available till then, I'm afraid it'll have to be the board, but as it becomes available, we'll make you aware, because I know your constituents will have many questions about it, and there's no point in, if we've got the info, waiting longer than we have.
Absolutely.
Okay, Councillor Dawn, you're coming back in, and then after that, Councillor Grady.
You read my mind there, Convener. That's exactly what I was going to ask, just to see if there is information prior to the board meeting, if individual ward members could be kept informed. And I completely appreciate all the work you're doing. I do understand the difficulties with it, so thanks.
Okay, that's great. Councillor Grady, you've got a further point to make. Are you coming back in?
Yes, thank you, Convener. I've got a couple of questions, but I'll just, since we're on the 1140 hours, I'll touch upon that. We were told that the 1140 hours budget could be used for COVID recovery. Has it been?
Councillor Patterson, I'll pick that up if that's okay.
There was a delay on unmuting my mic. Yes, I was going to ask Stephen to come in anyway, so yes, on you go, Stephen.
We are working across the service, Councillor Grady, to try and look at all costs that we're incurring across schools, across early years centres, and across our social work services. What we have to recognise as well, as Julie has touched on, we are now actually providing nearly 80% of 1140 to our population. So a big part of our 1140 revenue budget has already been taken up with actually providing 1140 hours. Where there are areas where there is a revenue budget still that we haven't used for 1140, we will look to use that across other parts of the service to ensure that we can try, where at all possible, to balance the budget in children's services this year.
Many thanks for that, Stephen. I remember when the Scottish Government announced it would have that flexibility, and although it's welcome to have flexibility, it was only obviously for those councils who maybe went as far down the line with us and expanding 1140 benefited greater from it than ourselves, because we had already committed so much money. It didn't give us as much flexibility as maybe other authorities who aren't as advanced in their plans. So, but Stephen is kind of giving you a bit of further detail on what we'll look to do. Did you said you had a couple other points, Councillor Grady? Is that correct? Yeah. Come on back in.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. I'd just like to go back a wee bit to page 18, paragraph 4.1, where it talks about appropriate protective and hygiene measures. I'd just like to ask if Renfrewshire schools are still following the Scottish Government's advice that face masks for pupils, and in particular senior pupils, are not required at this stage.
To the best of my knowledge, Councillor Grady, we are still following that advice, although if a pupil wants to wear a mask for any reason, they'll be supported in doing so. Nobody will be stopped for wearing one. I'll pass over to Stephen in case I've been incorrect in that assertion, but I think that is the case.
No, that is the case, Councillor Parson. We continue to ensure that the guidance we put out in Renfrewshire follows and adheres strictly to both the scientific and national advice that comes from the Scottish Government to us.
Is there any other points to be made? Councillor Grady, was that your last point? Or?
I've got one more, Convener.
On you go.
In 4.4, page 19, referring to local authorities required to put measures in place to support children who would no longer receive free school meals, and £11.25 that was given out. I was just wondering what percentage took up the offer in relation to normal circumstances? Thank you.
Well, it's my understanding it was an automatic enrolment for all those who were in receipt of free school meals, although obviously that's not always foolproof, and other parents did come forward and were added as we went along, and the money was backdated to the date in March when they became eligible. But I don't know if we've got the figures of the uptake, Stephen, or something along those lines.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Patterson. Councillor Grady, we went actually further than free school meal entitlement. We actually provided that payment to every child in Renfrewshire who was entitled to footwear and clothing grant. Now, normally that there are two different barriers in terms of how you can claim footwear and clothing grant. Doesn't necessarily get you free meal entitlement. So that, first of all, actually opened the payment up to more children in Renfrewshire. So it was beyond 100%. Further to that, we actively invited and encouraged parents from across Renfrewshire who hadn't necessarily applied for free meal entitlement, even although they are entitled to it. That happens all of the time. And we got a significant number of additional applications throughout the course of lockdown from parents for free meal entitlement, and we therefore also made the payment to all of those parents. And in addition to that, our head teachers worked with other directorates within the council to support families in food parcels and food supplies throughout the period as well. And that was in addition to the payment we made to families.
Thanks, Stephen. Many thanks for that. Obviously, when this first arose, many authorities took many different kind of approaches to that, but we were always adamant in Renfrewshire, the leader and I, that cash or bank transfers direct to parents was the most appropriate method, because although the voucher system does have its merits, we didn't want to restrict where parents could use it. And also, it's not just about purchasing the food, it's about the heating and the turning on the cooker to cook it. So hopefully that money has made a difference, and on top of the other measures that Stephen explained there, and hopefully that it did make a difference. And we also took a decision as a council to continue paying that over summer for the children, whereas obviously they wouldn't normally all be entitled to the meals over the summer. So we took that decision as well. Is there any other questions or comments on this agenda item, or can we agree? Okay, agreed. Item 3, which is in relation to school holiday alterations due to the fact that the schools returned slightly earlier than we'd first anticipated. Can I pass over to, well, first of all, is there any questions or comments on this? No, I didn't imagine so. So we can, I'll save Gordon the bother of having to talk to it, and can we just agree the report? The next item is for future school holidays for the following academic year. Is there any questions or comments on that one? So we can agree. Thank you. Bear with me, I'm experiencing a slight delay on my screen for getting to the next board paper. Oh. Item 5, the naming of the new non-denominational primary school in Dargaville Village, Bishopton. Does anybody have any questions or comments to make, or can we agree? Okay, thank you. Item 6. Item 6, response to the proposal to consult on admissions to schools and placing request policy. Do I have any questions or comments? Councillor Davidson? Are you there, Councillor Davidson? I've seen that you had indicated you wanted to speak.
Councillor Davidson, you're still showing as being on mute. That's you. We can hear you now.
Hear you now, Councillor Davidson.
Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, still tell me, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Right, okay. You can, good. Okay, still saying it's muted, but never mind. I just wish it to be noted that I'm very concerned that my question in February regarding single parents to be continued to be included as a priority was not noted in the minutes. I spoke to Gordon about that earlier today. Therefore, it's not been included in the consultation either. So I just want to say that single parents will be extremely dismayed that their rights are no longer being included. And can I ask the convener that at a future date we can have a discussion with officers to determine the impact on single parents for this? Thank you.
Well, first of all, I can only apologise, Councillor Davidson, that some error in the minutes meant that your comments weren't captured as part of the consultation process, and I'm sure Gordon echoes that. I'm happy to, if we want to meet in the future when we're physically meeting again, or if we want to arrange some kind of video call between now and then, I'm happy to do that. And what we'll do is we'll discuss some availability by email, and we'll take that forward. Okay. Is there any other? Councillor Davidson, you want to come back in? Sorry.
You're still on mute, Councillor Davidson.
Have you bit of some gremlins in the system? I think. Is there anybody else wants to make a comment or on this paper? And we'll no. Right, Councillor Davidson, I assume that you agree that we'll catch up about this at a later point then with the relevant officers, and we can have a discussion about the points you've raised. And other than that, can we agree the paper? Many thanks. Next item. By the time I scroll down. Item 7. Is there any questions or comments on item 7? None. Okie doke. Can I agree with the report then? Item 8. Is there any questions or comments on item 8? Okay. I agree with the report then. We're on to the last item, item 9. And Councillor Bibby's indicated I wish to make a question.
Yes, thanks, convener. It's heartening to know that children are being cared for predominantly in family situations. Obviously, there is a need for some children to require residential accommodation. In terms of the proposals, I know the capacity there now is down to 4 units. It's not uncommon for there to be a spike in the need for residential accommodation for young people arising from a spike in drug or alcohol issues, abuse or neglect. There's little wriggle room in terms of capacity, it would appear, to actually manage that without actually recourse to purchase placements. And we've seen in terms of the overspending in item 1, and we know that the costs of residential accommodation with the council is considerable. So I'm just asking what, if any, there is a contingency plan for an unpredicted rise in the need for residential accommodation, because obviously if we purchase an outside placement, that has considerable budget implications for the council. Thanks.
Thanks for the question, Councillor Bibby. As obviously as a council, even obviously under the last administration into this one, we have made a significant move away from outside placements, and that's a policy we'll continue with. But I appreciate your concerns, and I ask for John to come in and just answer anything that he can just now.
Yeah, thanks, convener. Councillor Bibby, that's a good question, and thanks for it. We've done quite a lot of modelling to look at the current capacity within the 4 units in houses that will remain within Renfrewshire. And there is at present some capacity within those houses, and there's also capacity to increase to those houses by opening up additional space and having 2 additional bedrooms. So we are confident on that. The current approach that we are taking within the council is absolutely to support children at home with their own parents where it's safe to do so. As an alternative, we will always seek to look at the support that families can have in a kinship arrangement. And then we don't have a hierarchy in terms of residential care or foster care. We look to see what's right for our children. There are some children that we have placed externally, and that was because of the particular individual needs of those children. So we will always continue to have that horizon scanning to see what type of placement best meets the needs of a child that the local authority does require to accommodate. But at the moment, we are very confident that even with the reduction, we will manage to provide adequate resources for children. We have enhanced some of the family support, so even if there are some challenges as a consequence of COVID lockdown of children bringing issues to our attention, we do in fact have adequate family support to respond, and we also, as I say, will look to other nature of services, including functional family therapy, including family support intensive from our own service, and we will look at where, if required, that we could open additional beds within our own children's houses.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John. Councillor Davidson, are you wishing to come in on this item? If I can hear, I think I can hear you now. No, away again. We'll give you a wee second. These IT issues, hopefully we won't have to accommodate them for too long, and we'll get back into the chambers soon enough. Because are you still with us, Councillor Davidson? You've disappeared from my screen also, as well as not being able to hear you, so I'm not 100% sure that you're still here, okay.
Convener Councillor Davidson is still showing as being online, but she's showing as muted.
Right, okay, doke. We'll give you, has anybody else got any questions or comments on this item? Sorry, I will ask in the meantime. Nope, we'll hang on, Councillor Davidson, so you get a chance to ask.
That's Councillor Davidson now.
Oh, on you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can, Councillor.
Okay, can you hear me? Oh, thank you. Well, I've run these questions by John already, so just some questions on 3.12, page 267. Redeployment, how many staff are involved? I'll just give you the whole lot because John's already, I've discussed on this, John. Would grades and salaries be maintained? I've been assured it will be, and again, not wasting, really skilled staff been not suitable. Employed or just any staff? And do they anticipate a high risk of sickness due to stress of people maybe coming up to retirement and then getting redeployed to different places? And will the people that are put in for VR be given the opportunity again in March or now to get it again next year? That was it. Thank you. Sorry, also, how long would they be redeployed for? Would this be a temporary thing or not? Thank you. That's me.
No problem, John. There's a couple of times you broke up, Councillor Davidson, but if John's familiar with the questions, I don't think that'll be an issue if he wants to come in and give you the answers in.
Thanks, Convener. Thanks, Councillor Davidson, and I appreciate the fact that you did give me early sight of these questions. So in terms of the staff who operate out of the 2 houses, Roneil and Longcroft, there are 12 members of staff. And that's because there have been already some reduction in staff. So, for example, the manager in Roneil, previous manager actually retired in June, and that was a planned retirement. So we will always have some natural turnover of staff within the children's residential service. So the number of staff that we are looking at in total is 12. What we have been doing in the current COVID period is all of those staff have helped to maintain staff rotas within the current children's houses, and we would maintain that over the next 6 months. And that's to ensure that as the young people within our houses, if there are any concerns or anxieties as a consequence of COVID, that we're able to support them with that. We've not seen an increase in sickness during COVID. We did have some staff who required to shield because of the government guidance. So, for example, some young people, some young women were pregnant and had to shield. We had a couple of workers who had some health issues and they required to shield. So the fact that we had some excess staff, we've actually been able to deploy appropriately. As we move forward with the change and reduction in the two houses, we will do a skills mix. We will look at a skills matrix. So all staff would be asked who are affected would be asked to complete that skills mix, and we will try to reaffirm where they go in terms of their best mix. But we do still have some current vacancies as well. So particularly in Charleston Square, where we will look to move some staff on an agreed basis there. The council does have a redeployment process, and staff will be supported in that in terms of their current terms and conditions. I think I mentioned to you I already had one member of staff who'd asked if she potentially could move into adult services to residential adult. So we would look across the types of service where there are vacancies, and some people might take the choice to move from residential to family support or into adult services. In terms of VR, VER, we're obviously just before or just after we went into lockdown, we had to pause the programme. There will be further discussions with that, and the expressions of interest for staff have been held and are retained, and if we reactivate that programme, then those people will not have to reapply, but we will check whether they wish to continue down that route. I hope that's helpful.
Thanks very much for that very informative answer, John. Is there any other questions, comments, or are we happy to agree item? Okay, thanks everyone, and that's the last item on the agenda. Thanks very much for your attendance today and your patience with the technology. It's much appreciated, and hopefully we won't have to do this for too much longer as well. All right, take care everyone.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks.
Sabina.